gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2024 annual meetings of the African Development Bank Group. These annual meetings take on a special nature this year because it marks the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the African Development Bank Group. We are delighted that you all are able to join us on this auspicious occasion. I wish to thank His Excellency President William Ruto for accepting to host these annual meetings in this beautiful country of Kenya and the Sunshine City of Nairobi. I wish to thank you all our heads of state and government for making time to join us for this special occasion. We are truly delighted that all our shareholders are here, represented by our dear governors from all of our shareholder countries. Your collective support, advocacy, and financial commitments to the African Development Bank Group make us who we are and afford us the opportunity to serve as Africa's premier financial institution. We are inspired by the vision of our founding fathers and mindful of our position and the role within the global financial architecture, as well as the responsibility placed on us by the African Union to mobilize financing for Africa's development. We carry the hopes and the aspirations of Africa in our institutional genes and in our corporate soul. As we gather today, we do so against the backdrop of major global challenges, including heightened geopolitical tensions, the disruption of global value chains, rising food and energy prices, increasing debt service payments, and, of course, climate change. The devastating effects of climate change are everywhere, from droughts to floods, from cyclones to unpredictable weather patterns, the loss of lives and property, and enormous fiscal costs to countries. May I please kindly request that we all stand to observe a moment of silence in honor of those who lost their lives during the recent floods in Kenya and all other countries who have been devastated by the effects of the climate change they did not cause or even know about. Your Excellencies. Thank you very much. May their souls rest in peace. Even as we remember them, we must be resolute about taking decisive action to build more climate-resilient economies. That's why I applaud President Ruto for hosting the landmark Africa Climate Summit right here in Kenya, where we collectively agreed to put Africa at the heart of global climate change efforts, especially climate adaptation. Your Excellencies, African economies are showing great resilience despite the challenges posed by climate change, geopolitical tensions, global inflation, and rising debt, among others. The African Development Bank projects that Africa's real GDP growth will rise from 3.1% in 2023 to 3.7% in 2024 and 4.3% in 2025. Importantly, despite these headwinds, more than half, that is 31 countries, achieved higher real GDP growth rates in 2023 than in 2022. And most importantly, 10 African countries are among the 20 fastest growing economies in the world. I think we've done well against the headwinds. I think we deserve a clap for Africa. The African Development Bank Group strongly supports African economies. In 2023, our financing totaled $10 billion across all of our high five priorities: to light up and power Africa, to feed Africa, to industrialize Africa, to integrate Africa, and to improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. These high fives, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, are the accelerators of Africa's development. The bottom line is that the African Development Bank delivers. Since we launched these high fives in 2016, our financing has impacted the lives of over 400 million people. last year, our work has significant impact across the continent, with 11 million farmers provided with access to improved agricultural technologies, 8 million people provided with access to new sanitation services, 3.5 million people with access to improved transport, 2.8 million people provided with better health services, 1 million people provided with access to clean water, and over 443,000 enterprises provided with access to finance. The African Development Bank is highly responsive. When the Russian war in Ukraine erupted, it posed tremendous food security risks to Africa. To forestall a crisis, the bank launched a $1.5 billion emergency food production facility to rapidly support African countries in their ambition to reduce food dependency over a 2-year period. As of April 2024, we have approved loans and grants of $1.496, to be precise, billion for this emergency food production in 35 countries. We also got help and support from our shareholders. $323 million of additional support from the government of Japan, the government of the United States, Norway, Germany, and the Netherlands. We have therefore fully committed $1.8 billion to 35 countries. I am pleased to report, Your Excellencies, dear governors, that we have reached 10.5 million farmers and supported the production of 26 million metric tons of food, valued at $10.79 billion, or 90% of our target market value, and we still have about 2 seasons to go. Your Excellencies, dear governors, the African Development Bank is a strategic partner of choice, trusted by countries. Right here in Kenya, when I came to see His Excellency President Ruto, he talked about our support making a huge difference at the State House. As he mentioned to me, President Ruto mentioned to me that when I visited, he says, thanks to the African Development Bank, we increased the number of households in Kenya that have access to connectivity to electricity from 2.5 million to 10 million by 2023. Thank you for that testimony, Your Excellency, Mr. President. On one of my trips to a village where the bank supported last mile connectivity for low-income households, a lady whose name was Grace, and that's not Grace, my wife, that's also Grace, told us about the impact of our work. When asked if she knows Dr. Adesina as I was walking in front of her, she said no. When asked if she was aware that the African Development Bank, as President Ruto was saying, financed the project, she said no. All I know is we once were in darkness, now we have light. Our impact is felt where it matters most, in the lives of the people we serve day and night. The African Development Bank has consistently invested in infrastructure. In the past 9 years, we have invested over $50 billion in infrastructure projects on the continent. By far the largest investment of any multilateral development bank or institution. And the impacts are visible. We are raising $3.2 billion for the East Africa Standard Gauge Railway connecting Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Burundi. We are providing $500 million towards the development of the Lobito Corridor to link Zambia, Angola, and the DRC. We are mobilizing $375 million for financing the railway linking Nigeria to Niger Republic. We are mobilizing $3.5 billion to $5 billion towards the development of the Liberty Corridor that will link Liberia and Guinea. We have worked with our partners under the Africa Investment Forum to mobilize $15.6 billion of investment commitment towards the development of the Lagos-Abidjan corridor. Together with Africa 50, whose board I chair, and it's a great institution. We are mobilizing $630 million for the construction of the road and rail to link the Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo. We are financing the Guasif-Nado Highway in Morocco and the 1,000-kilometer highway linking Addis Ababa to Nairobi and Mombasa, which has expanded trade flows between Ethiopia and Kenya by 400%. That's who we are, a solutions and impact-driven bank. The African Development Bank, your bank, is in very strong financial shape. We have maintained our AAA rating, the only AAA-rated financial institution in Africa, by all global credit rating agencies. The bank posted strong financial records for the year 2023. First, income from loans and treasury investments increased from $775 million in 2022 to $1.73 billion in 2023, an increase of 123%. Second, the net income before distributions at $545 million is the largest ever in the history of the African Development Bank. Third, the amount that we allocate to reserve to build our liquidity buffers, $335 million, is also the highest ever in the history of the bank. I wish to thank the executive directors of the bank and their advisors, as well as my senior management and staff at the bank for their hard work and efforts, and please join me in thanking them. Yet, as we make these efforts, we recognize that a lot more financing is needed to accelerate Africa's growth and development. The calls for reforms of the global financial architecture is necessary to mobilize even more financial resources to achieve Africa's sustainable development goals. The G20 Capital Adequacy Framework called for multilateral development banks to optimize their balance sheets, to raise more financing to support countries. The African Development Bank, Your Excellencies, our dear governors, ladies and gentlemen, heeded that call. We have been at the forefront of several financial innovations to achieve this. Last month, the African Development Bank issued a hybrid capital on the global capital market, the first ever by a multilateral development bank, creating a new global asset class for investors. These $750 million hybrid capital will leverage 3 to 4 times to expand the bank's lending capacity. I am delighted that 2 weeks ago, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, approved the use of the special drawing rights, SDRs, as hybrid capital, which is based on the proposal developed by the African Development Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. If the approved limit of $20 billion of the SDRs is channeled to multilateral development banks like us, we can leverage these to deliver at least $80 billion of new financial support. I would like to use this time to thank you, our heads of states and government, for the advocacy that you have maintained on this particular issue at every single step, and also for the chairman of the African Union Commission, my dear brother Musa Faki, for all of the advocacy that you have also maintained, and for all of our governors for supporting us in this particular area. We are very grateful. Thank you very, very much. Now, I wish to ask for the support of all of our shareholders to make this a reality. Your Excellencies, dear governors, ladies and gentlemen, to tackle climate change, the African Development Bank is well on its way to reaching our goal of mobilizing $25 billion in climate finance. Last year, we devoted 45% of our total lending to climate finance. Our climate action window, under 16th replenishment of the African Development Fund, with support from the governments of the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Germany, and Switzerland, opened its first call for proposals. The response was amazing. It received over 2,000 proposals, and the 359 shortlisted application requests were close to $4 billion. The bank, your bank, is building strong and effective global partnerships to deliver more for Africa. Through the support of the G7, we are accelerating women's access to finance through what we call the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, or AFAWA, in partnership with the Africa Guarantee Fund, which is now working with 169 financial institutions in 43 countries. And I would like to say that Africa will go faster when we make sure that it flies with two wings. No bird flies with one wing. When we support our women, they actually run most of our economies. I think Africa will go faster, more inclusively. AFAWA, Your Excellencies, their governance is the first ever gender-focused collateralized significant risk transfer. The counter guarantees provided by the governments of Netherlands and France in support of scaling of finance for women. So far, AFAWA has approved $1.7 billion and financed over 18,300 women-owned businesses. By the end of this year, AFAWA will have reached $2 billion in support of 30,000 women-owned small and medium-sized enterprises. Your Excellencies, their governance to support youth entrepreneurship in Africa and to create youth-based wealth, the bank has established youth entrepreneurship investment banks. In partnership with the French development agency, Agence Française de Développement, and other partners, with support from the bank's multi-donor Youth Entrepreneurship Trust Fund. Ever since our board approved the first two Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks in Liberia with $16 million of funding, and Ethiopia recently with $12 million of funding, several countries, including Nigeria, Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, Tunisia, Togo, Egypt, South Africa, Zambia, Botswana, DRC, are working on submissions of their request. Your Excellencies, the bank is working with several partners to ramp up support for digital and creative sectors to create more jobs. Together with Islamic Development Bank, and my brother Al-Jazair is here, and the Agence Française de Développement, we financed $618 million IDICE program called Initiative for the Development of Digital and Creative Enterprises in Nigeria that will create 6 million jobs and add $6.4 billion to the economy. The African Development Bank, Africa 50, and the African Union established what's called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, or AGIA, which will mobilize $10 billion for green infrastructure in Africa and speed up Africa's green transitions. I am delighted. At the G7 Ministerial Conference in Italy just a few days ago, they gave global endorsement for AGIA. Together with the Islamic Development Bank, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the OPEC Fund, the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, the Africa Export and Import Bank, and the West African Development Bank, we are establishing what's called special agro-industrial processing zones in 11 African countries, including a $3 billion facility by the African Development Bank, Afri-Exim Bank, and the Arise platform. Your Excellencies, they ask us to work together as multilateral development banks, and we are doing that. At the spring meetings of the World Bank Group, President Ajay Banga and I launched a joint bold effort to connect 300 million people in Africa to electricity by 2030. We will host this year, together with Your Excellencies, an Africa Energy Summit later this year. I must say, this marks the first time for our institution. So not only are we reforming, but we are also changing how we work together as a system to deliver greater impacts at scale. That's because together we can and we will achieve more. Your Excellencies, for generations, women in Africa have borne the brunt of risks and hardships associated with cooking. Nothing could be more important than ensuring 1.2 billion people, majority of whom are women across Africa, have access to clean cooking solutions. I didn't start using glasses because I went to university and got smart. I started using glasses because as a kid I was blowing charcoal into the cooking stoves of my mother. And when she bought a cooker for which we can turn on the gas, it was blue, I had to invite my friends to come and see it. In fact, I was turning it on because of the smell, because it was so different from the kind of smell that I used to have. So when we are talking about energy transitions, that is the kind of transition some of us have gone through. And therefore, I believe no woman and no child should ever have to die from the risk associated with smoke inhalation and other hazards, because today we lose 300,000 women for trying to cook a decent meal. Another 300,000 of their kids dying for trying to cook a decent meal. Enough is enough. It's not just about lighting a stove, it's about life itself. It is about dignity for women. And it's about protecting the environment from massive deforestation and a reliance on biofuel, biomass, firewood, and charcoal. And that's why I was honored and privileged to co-chair the Clean Cooking in Africa Summit with Our Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the Republic of Tanzania, who did a marvelous job, His Excellency Jonas Thor, the Prime Minister of Norway, and Dr. Birol, the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. The African Development Bank led the way by committing to provide $2 billion towards clean cooking solutions for women over the next 10 years. I am delighted that the summit in Paris raised an additional $2.1 billion in commitments, bringing the total commitments to clean cooking to $4.1 billion, a historic achievement and a testament to the power of partnerships. Thank you very much. I thank you, all our shareholders across all 81 member countries, for providing us the support and the resources we need to serve Africa better. With your continued support, we will drive a bolder, bigger, and better agenda for Africa. I thank you, our partners, for joining your hands with ours as we deliver more together for Africa, and as we have done for the last 60 years. I thank you, our dear heads of states, your excellencies, heads of state and government, as you lead and as you show passion and commitment to the African Development Bank Group, to our continent, and for your generosity towards our efforts with you in your countries. I thank you, our boards of directors, for always mobilizing support for us in your countries, and for relentless efforts you make to back our innovations and initiatives.